and welcome to this Astranti video. In this video, I'm going to be introducing our new objective test videos for the P3 module of the CIMA syllabus. I'm also going to be taking you through my 3 top tips for passing your P3 exams. So what are our objective test videos? Well, in these videos, our tutors walk you through a guided solution to 100 different P3 exam style questions. So in these solutions, we'll give you a full debrief about how we would tackle these example questions, going through the solutions with handwritten notes and explanations. So these questions cover every single chapter in our P3 study texts. So topics will range all the way from risk management to internal audit and cybersecurity. And the questions themselves will be based on representative task statements. So they will closely mirror the topics that you'll be tested on in your exam. So these are our objective test videos. So what about my 3 top tips? Well, my first top tip for passing your P3 exams is to look to apply the models to the questions that you've been given. So this means that you should start by making sure that you know the models like the back of your hand. Once you've done this, try to apply the models that you've learned to the scenario you're being asked about. So I have an example of a question based on a model on screen now. So in this question, you're told that Joyride, a car manufacturer, is considering new strategies for growth and has asked for advice. And the question specifically asks you to analyse the risk in the strategies that are suggested in the 4 options provided. So you've been asked about how the company can grow, and you've also been asked to analyse the risk associated with the method of growth. So the P3 model that should immediately come to mind here is Ansough's matrix. So whilst it might be tempting to go through the options one by one and consider them through the lens of maybe your own opinion or your own experience, for your P3 exam it will be much more effective to immediately try to apply these options to the Ansough's matrix model that you have learned. So by doing this, you can see that the option that would involve selling a new product in a new market would be the most risky, and the option that would involve selling the current product in the current market would be the least risky. So by using the model and applying it to the question, we already have a framework for arriving at the correct answer. So moving on to my second top tip for passing your P3 exams, and that is not to skip the straightforward topics. So even though P3 is the most difficult exam of the performance pillar of the CIMA syllabus, there are still relatively straightforward pieces of content involved. So I have an example of a relatively straightforward P3 mock question on screen now. So this just asks which of the following statements are correct regarding the role of executive directors on the board of directors. So answering this question is just a case of remembering information that you have revised. So again, because P3 does contain some relatively difficult concepts, it is tempting to just focus on those more difficult aspects of the syllabus. However, make sure that you put yourself in a position to gain the easy marks too. After all, remember, a mark is a mark. So my third and final tip for passing your P3 exam is to make sure that you carefully weigh up each option. So the P3 exam is a step up from the P2 exam. So as a consequence, it might not always be immediately obvious which option is the best, even if you have memorized all of the relevant material. So you need to make sure that you carefully consider each option and how it would play out in practice. So as an example, a question I have on screen now talks about the directors of a fictional company being able to vote to give themselves high salaries. So we need to advise this company on the best way to overcome this issue. So as an example of an incorrect response to this question that could potentially appear to be correct, could be to say that the CEO should determine the salaries for executive directors, as of course this would solve the problem of directors being able to vote themselves high remuneration. However, if we consider this option a bit more, we might realise that if the CEO were to set high salaries for the directors, then the directors themselves could in return set a high salary for the CEO. So this option wouldn't necessarily work out as well as it originally seemed to. So we need to make sure that we're not rash with the options that we pick, and we carefully consider what each option might imply. So this is my third and final top tip to help you to pass your P3 exams. So to round this video off, I'll now play a quick sample of an objective test video from our P3 series.
Okay, in question 2 we've got the same syllabus reference, so the requirement line reads, which of the following are the primary risks of PPP's approach to strategic development? So we've got to find the primary risks of their particular approach. So it stands to reason we need to know what their approach is. So let's go through the scenario. PPP is a national state-run railway operator. 3 of its major stakeholder groups are unable to agree on long-term goals. So often shorter-term strategic goals are agreed upon. PPP holds regular meetings with major stakeholders in which changes to PPP's strategy are made. So what jumps out at me from that scenario is there's a lot of consultation with stakeholders, and in fact, instead of longer term goals, shorter term strategic goals are agreed upon. Okay, now to me, what PPP are using is an incrementalist approach. As we briefly talked about in the last question, incrementalism is an approach to strategic planning that's characterized by making regular, small, short-term changes to strategy based on the consensus, the regular meetings with major stakeholders. Okay, so now we know the strategic approach that PPP is taking. Now we need to go through and find the primary risks. Okay, so we've got 2 that apply. So let's go to the options, and the first is risk of missing long-term opportunities. Well, we know, don't we, that using incrementalism there is a short-term focus. Now, the risk with a short-term focus is that it may mean an organization loses out on long-term opportunities because the organization is focusing on the short term, and there to get these long-term opportunities, it may mean short-term sacrifices which the stakeholders are unlikely to agree upon because they're only looking at the short term rather than the benefits it will bring in the long term. So that's a correct answer. And the next answer, lack of long-term focus. I don't think this is going to be very hard to realize they're quite linked together. So if we've got a lack of long-term focus, it means, again, just like we saw with our previous answer, we're focusing on the short term. And this focus on the short term could prevent decisions being made that are going to benefit PPP in the long term. Because once again, the stakeholders may not agree to short-term sacrifices that may have well bought long-term benefits. So there we go. We've got our 2 answers straight away. But now what we need to do is go through the rest of them to make sure that our logic is sound. Okay, so our next possible answer is decisions being made on insufficient research. Well, what do we know about incrementalism? Decisions are reached by using the consensus of opinion of a company's major stakeholders. This means that many different perspectives are considered. Now, this reduces the likelihood that decisions are going to be based on insufficient research because you have all these different perspectives and stakeholders to consult. Our next possible option is it's very time consuming. Okay, we know, or we spoke about the rational planning model in the first question, and we know there's a lot of stages of analysis and research and generating options which make it very time consuming. Now, with incrementalism, it does require good, relatively frequent communication between a company's stakeholders, and this does take time, but it's not as time consuming as the long-term approaches to strategic development, such as rational planning model. So it's not very time consuming. And our final answer is a lack of flexibility. Well, we know that one of the characteristics of incrementalism is its frequent small strategic changes. Now, this makes it very flexible. And so lack of flexibility is not a risk. And we were correct with our first 2 answers, A and B. Now on to the next question.
So thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope it's been helpful. If it was helpful, make sure that you like this video and subscribe to our channel. So a full 18 chapter set is now available for P3 on our website at astranti.com, and in fact the first 3 chapters are now available for free, so make sure you check out those free chapters and see if they tempt you to buy the rest of the set. So thanks again for watching this video, and I hope you'll join me for the next one.